not understanding where somebody's coming from, difference in cultures. At that time, we were talking a little bit about about Far East culture, how some of those, you have to be careful with some of those potential pitfalls. If you want to speak to that a little bit, what we were talking about before we got on.
Yeah. So what can happen is if in some cultures, it's saving face is very important. And so when we get, say, a deficiency notice or a request for testing, sometimes the reason for the question is not that there's a lack of data or a concern that there's a lack of data. It's really a misunderstanding, and they don't want to say that they're confused. This also can happen if you get a deficiency notice, you provide a response, then the second you get a response back that basically asks you the same question, and you're scratching your head thinking, wait a minute, I just told you, don't you get it? See Appendix A, subpart 1, ta-da! And what I told you that, and right. But they keep asking the same question, or they ask a question that seems like it's out of the blue, and you think, why didn't they just ask that in the previous notice? Where did this come from? And a lot of that is due to having an underlying confusion, and they don't want to tell you. And in many countries, they won't tell you to your face. They won't say no. And in many times, they won't say yes. So I can go in and make a presentation. People can be very polite, nod, and like, oh, they must agree with me. And then you'll still get a rejection. And it's like, wait a minute, we presented, we shook hands, whatever. And it's still not accepted. What's the problem? Why didn't you say, what is your problem? And this is where the cultural intelligence helps, and that you have this is another point about where to invest money wisely. And that is to have someone who's very culturally astute, knows how to build relationships with the reviewers, and in China with the testing center, hugely important, in country, that can navigate, is this a confusion or is this really a data issue? And can get to the heart of it, and then can, in a culturally appropriate way, deal with it. Because Americans aren't used to dealing with that, and it's over our head. It's sometimes when they say, it's a China thing or a Japanese thing, it actually is, and it's best to let your experts over there be your best ally and handle that for you.
Well, and it's so important. I know when we coach and we prep for interviews, oftentimes if English is not their primary language, I always coach people. I mean, I always, first of all, joke, I speak 2 languages, English and bad English. Usually the people that I'm working with are a lot smarter than I am. And that person that English isn't their primary language typically speaks 2, 3, sometimes 4 languages. But in terms of the person that's not, particularly on the phone, right? If you're on the phone, certain people, if they don't see your lips, they don't have that ability to understand whatever that accent is. So, pacing in terms of the conversation, but giving somebody the freedom right up front in terms of, hey, English isn't my primary language. I get excited when I get excited, I talk a little bit fast, and give them permission. Hey, if you don't understand something, please ask me, repeat it, stop me, because most people, they don't want to offend anybody. They don't want to be embarrassed. And then they're not going to bring it up. So then, that's just from a U.S. standpoint. So you're talking about cultural challenges where if you don't really work on that communication and the understanding piece, that you can have all kinds of problems and think that you don't have them. And then obviously they're going to affect the flow of the business or that submission process.
That is so, so true. And the other thing is like that you brought up a really good point. When dealing with other, with row markets, some people, if they say they learn English, they may only learn how to write, but not how to talk. So they may be very uncomfortable speaking, but prefer to only work by email. And so unfortunately, because email is a limited form of communication, we have a lot of lost in translation, if you will, because just of the limitations of using email. And so there's people that are very relationship oriented, because you don't get a sense of tone, you can't see body language, then you miss out on what in a human way they use to connect or to get a vibe or a feel or to trust. And you lose that with just email. But if they're too afraid to talk to you, then that you really need to have local language expertise in-house, or if not, hire it, because contract it, because it's so important, especially for the major markets. It's absolutely worth the investment.
And again, comes back to how important it is in how you treat people, how you listen, understand, how do you communicate if you're in the U.S. dealing with a dealer or an employee, if it's a bigger, one of your larger companies that has those larger teams, so things don't get lost in translation and you can develop that relationship.